Hey everyone, Michael Short here. Come on, let's go outdoors. Well, it's been a while since I checked in with our next guest. Real pleasure to welcome back Everett Hanna. He is the chair of the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. And Everett, I guess you managed to survive the winter months and ready for another season.
Yeah, that's right, Michael. Thanks a lot for giving us a chance to connect here with you. It's always our pleasure to chat about what's going on in our neck of the woods. I survived quite well the winter. I live down in Lethbridge, so sometimes it's hard to even call it a winter down here. This winter was sort of the middle of the road that way, so not too bad for us, anyways.
Well, spring has come on in I can't remember a spring like this in terms of just turn up the thermostat, and that obviously has created a lot of issues. We're rolling into a long weekend, and I guess it's really an opportunity for us to just remind folks are coming out of the winter. They want to get into the backcountry. They want to go and experience what Alberta has to offer. But I mean, obviously, where there's wildfires currently, and there's people are being not allowed back into communities and towns. Obviously, those are no-go zones. But even in areas where there are no active fires, we just got to be extra careful out there, don't we?
Yeah, that's right. I was just actually over in the East Kootenays over the weekend doing some outdoor exploration myself, and just by chance happened to come across a wildfire that I reported to the BC wildfire folks, and just kind of got an update from them this morning on that. Luckily, it didn't get too big, and no damage occurred, but certainly it's dry across the board in many places in here in the West. As usual, we're always talking about preventing wildfires, be it in a bad season like this one or otherwise. But the things we really focus on is just not starting things that can, or using things rather that can start a fire, be that a cigarette, be it a fire itself, a campfire, or even things like gas powered lanterns, using alternatives like fuel and stoves, like, jet boils, those really portable ones they have now are quite effective at boiling water very quickly. And also, of course, so many people now are using battery powered headlamps and the likes, but really just reminding anyone who has maybe those older style light sources like a gas powered lantern to be careful and take a second thought about using them in such a dry season that we're having this year. And also just to extend, general words of sympathy and encouragement to all the folks that are being affected by wildfires. I live in Lethbridge now, but I lived in Lac La Biche during the Fort McMurray wildfires, and certainly wasn't affected directly, but secondarily saw the effects on a lot of people. It can be a very tough time, and obviously everyone here at BHA is doing what we can, be it if we're in the local area, our membership, or someone like myself, sort of just keeping an eye on it, doing interviews like this to help everybody keep safe and prevent starting more fires, which is the last thing we need right now, obviously, going on. I wanted to mention too, OHVs, in general, we have to be really cautious using OHVs out there in the backcountry. We have pretty good designated trail systems here in the province. When folks follow those rules, it keeps things pretty safe. But even in times of, even when following those safety precautions in times of such dryness like we have now, the government's enacted a complete, moratorium, effectively a ban on use of off-highway vehicles on public lands, and that includes on designated OHV trails, just because the risk is so high. So there's a whole bunch of ways there in which you can kind of minimize potential for spreading or starting fires, and we encourage all of our members and others to follow those rules.
You made an interesting point that when you were out in the backcountry, you noticed a fire and called it in. And I guess in many ways, folks like backcountry hunters and anglers, or anyone that enjoys spending time in the backcountry, getting off the beaten trail responsibly, really can offer a set of eyes and a voice to what they see, and it's not tattletaling on something, but we all have that responsibility, I suppose, to be responsive to what's happening on all of our land base, right?
I agree. That's sort of the notion of being a good steward, right? We share the resource together, and in being a shared resource, we all have a shared sort of responsibility to look after it. So I would agree with you wholeheartedly. And in that case of that fire, it was probably a couple acres in size when we first saw it. I just heard from the fellow this morning, as I mentioned, that it got to about 19 hectares, but it's still burning today, and we spotted it on Saturday. So, it's a big deal even with a small fire like that to catch it early, to be able to sort of hold it at bay and prevent it from getting out of control.
Well, let's move on to maybe some brighter news. Everett, you're moving into the spring summer season, as we mentioned off the top. What kinds of activities and events do you folks have? I recall last year having a blast heading up to Alfred Lake to take in the sort of a workshop on various outdoor activities. Are more events like that underway?
Yeah, so we did unfortunately have to postpone what we call the Alberta Rendezvous this year. We just took that unfortunate decision in the last couple of weeks, primarily due to volunteer bandwidth. I'm sure you are aware of, and many other people out there will be aware of, the sort of reduction in capacity in general volunteerism post-pandemic that we've observed. It's across the board with charities, it seems, and certainly BHA, both in Alberta as well as in Canada and in throughout the US, is experiencing a reduction in volunteerism in general. So we've had to sort of take a look in the mirror and see where we were at with bandwidth, and decided that this year we'd postpone the event. It was a great event. Rendezvous is a great time for everyone to come together, as you mentioned, at AHIA's Alfred Lake facility, which we're very thankful for AHIA, of course, helping us to use. But this year is just a no-go for us. However, we are working targetedly on revitalizing our volunteer base, essentially through committee work, but also through a lot of projects that we're sort of having the pike at the moment, hoping to roll out here this year and into early next year. One sort of challenge we've been facing recently is that we're undertaking a review for charitable status through the CRA to establish BHA Canada as an entity. The way we're set up right now is we have provincial chapters, on territorial chapter in Yukon, which are chapters of the US, or HQ, as we call it, headquarters out of Montana. However, there's many challenges that come with having that sort of an administrative setup. Most notably, we cannot issue charitable tax receipts here in Canada, as well as a few other sort of downsides of not being an official charity. And so this CRA application will allow us to obviously overcome those issues. And we also have plans to ultimately hire a Canadian coordinator, BHA Canada coordinator, to help with things like Rendezvous, for example. You know, I don't know if you've been involved in planning that type of an event. I've done so in my sort of personal life through volunteerism with BHA, but also professionally in a number of cases. And it is a lot of work to put together workshops, facilities, food, you know, registration, raffles, etc. So we're really hopeful and excited that we can get our review with CRA completed in the near future. Of course, the federal union workers strike put us back a little bit. And of course, the CRA union being one of the ones, or the only one that didn't ratify initially there, also slowed things down a bit. But in any case, we're hopeful that we can get back up and running. We've had to kind of go offline, online with regards to our website during the review process on advice of our lawyers. However, we've maintained our sort of Facebook group and Instagram feed as much as we can to provide information for members out there. So people can stay tuned for more up and coming events through the website once we get it back up and published. But for now, we're kind of working in a weird in between land as we await the review outcome from CRA.
Yeah, I can imagine administratively that does throw a pretty big wrench into things. In terms of, I mean, over the years, again, coming back, I guess, around to the volunteers, you've been involved with stream work, restoration, that type of thing. Again, it is, you know, are you facing that crunch where you're unable to provide support to Trout Unlimited and other groups that way?
We're still actively involved with those types of groups. So stream remediation, general sort of public land cleanups. We've been working on some like outdoor sort of education events, as well as some fishing line recycling station projects. We're still engaged in those things as much as we can, but certainly, yeah, we're feeling the pinch in all of those areas when it comes to putting together, you know, a big team to go out and do that kind of work. Interestingly, getting the people out to actually do the work is not the challenge. Sometimes it is. It's often having sufficient sort of administrative volunteerism to plan to get those folks out and to bring them together for whatever sort of event it might be. So that's where we're kind of targeting our volunteer recruitment at the moment, and planning strategically for the next year or so to increase that capacity.
Of course, one of the other things that you folks are known for is is taking a stand and presenting some views on how we should be approaching our public lands, and that kind of folds into what's happening in Alberta right now, Everett, and that is a provincial election. I know that you folks have reached out to various candidates to get a sense from them, and you've come up with a list of what you're looking for in whomever forms the next government.
Precisely. So we surveyed our members a few months back and received just under 100 responses from our members that shared their perspectives and values with us, which we sort of, as best we could, collated into our top 5 priorities. With those top five priorities, we formed a letter which we sent to the major political parties. We've received confirmation of receipt of those. We're now awaiting responses from them with regards to the questions we specifically put to them. But just to give you sort of a sample, I'll give you the 5 top points here that we've put to them, not in detail, but at a sort of high-level summary. So the first relates to the sale of public lands. There have been concerns raised about the transparency regarding these sales and, of course, the loss of those public lands. And so we've put forth to the parties a question that asks if they'll commit to halting sale of public lands until after public input, including consent from First Nations and other Indigenous groups, has been sought. We're also very concerned about the way in which grazing dispositions are being handled as it relates to access, especially for hunters, but recreationists in general. So we've asked the parties if they will commit to revising the Recreation Access Regulation, or RAR, or RARE as it's often put, to improve access for hunting, fishing, whatever else you might want to do on our public lands. We've also asked, of course, about the coal policy. We've asked if the government, if the party forms government, rather, if they plan to update the Alberta coal policy. What will it look like with regards to new coal exploration and mining in previously protected areas? And what will happen with those recently explored areas? Will they be rehabilitated, or will they be left to stand? Those are very important sort of targeted pieces of that equation. Our fourth question relates to the renewable energy sector. So we would like to see a more formal incorporation of ecological, wildlife, and water, importantly, sustainability into its planning and project development. So we've asked the government, or the parties rather, if they form government, will they commit to doing so? And lastly, with regards to funding for wildlife habitat restoration, anything from prescribed fires to stream enhancements to selective logging methodologies and many others that are out there, we've asked them if they will increase funding to those things and how they will sort of prioritize them amongst the various sort of priorities they might have as government.
So
we have, like I said, we've had the parties confirm receipt, but we're still waiting for the responses. But of course, we look forward to working with whichever party forms government next constructively to optimize the outcomes for backcountry hunting, angling, and recreating in general.
Well, it sounds like there's an awful lot taking place within the boardroom of the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, Everett, and always a pleasure to be able to chat with you on a wide range of topics, and we certainly look forward to an opportunity to continue our conversation. And until next time, thanks very much for being here.
You're welcome, Michael. Thank you.